Right livelihood. Again, a topic which is not often talked about in Dhamma talks, especially in meditation retreats. But this is the 37 requisites of enlightenment. So, right livelihood gets included in a requisite for enlightenment. As lay Buddhists, you're fortunate. You don't have to wear special clothes. Think about that. How many organizations and religious structures where you got to wear headscarves or special underwear or something like that. And you get complete flexibility. The Buddha's not trying to make any impediments to your functioning in the world. The Dhamma in the lay life is fully functional, but there are ethical restraints, so he's much more interested in your internal life and your speech and action than any particular marks of being a member of a certain religious school. That is left to the monks who have to conform, and these types of outward expressions are very important for monastics, but monastics are only a small part of the population. The Buddha never imagined that they would be a significant part of the population, but they're very important in terms of just savoring or flavoring the dish of society. A few grains of salt goes a long ways. We do have a livelihood as alms mendicants. That's our livelihood. And we're restricted in any other kind of activity, including just, gardening for ourselves or raising food for ourselves. For lay people, it's wide open, except for a few prohibited type of livelihoods, which would engage your mind in unskillful things, making of weapons, of poison, trafficking in humans, and the slaughter of animals. These are, of course, common livelihoods. I remember a story during the Vietnam War about a professor of engineering at MIT that resigned because most of the engineering students were going into the war, into the military industry of making the very sophisticated weapons that they didn't want to be training these, at the time, mostly young men, some young women, to be sent off to making these weapons. And so we come into conflict. What are we making these weapons for? There's only one purpose for them. So the Buddha is just saying, stay out of it. Find another livelihood. But it's quite liberal in terms of people have, I would say, excessive conscientiousness about things. They're worried about secondary and tertiary kind of effects of their livelihood. How is it affecting the rest of the world in terms of equity and this kind of thing? The Buddha is saying, that is not of essential moral concern in terms of your mind. What the essence of it is, if you want to stay sane, is that you have to think about your intentions. And there's all kinds of side effects of whatever we do in life. Driving a car, you're going to have insects smacking on the windshield and the possibility of accidents and so forth. There's all kinds of secondary effects. We get too lost in these secondary, tertiary, etc., all kinds of series. We're not actually responsible for all of the secondary unseen results of these things. And it's important that we understand that the Buddha defined that. He says, your moral. There were competitive schools. One of them is the Jains. The Jain monks and some of the Jain lay people, they had such a concern for any kind of injury to beings that it went to extremes and it is impossible to carry out. And it didn't matter about your intention. So if you stepped on an insect unwittingly, without intention, that was karmic. It was a stain on your jivang, whatever the heart sort of thing. The Buddha was very careful to define this as like negative actions are intentional. And if it's not, there's no hope whatsoever. The accidental side effects of your walking through life is it's not possible to bring those into the calculation, so you have to stay with intentional actions. So the livelihood and all the way we think about things as well, people get very, very concerned. Social issues get carried away. And particularly in areas like food and so forth, there's all kinds of, if you eat avocados, there's implications for insects, all kinds of stuff like this. And all is it's well and good. If you have particular social agendas that you want to support, is fine. But one should not feel like that you're developing some sort of karmic response or prolonging your experience in samsara by neglecting those things. You don't have to do everything. In fact, you can't do everything. But you must do something. And by the way, this obligation, social obligations to certain duties, some people will criticize people who don't engage in certain social projects, certain things, as if you are guilty for that. In fact, some people are critical of the whole idea of practicing mindfulness and everything because it makes you more stable and calm, and they think you should be more passionate and enraged because there's so many injustices. So they don't want you to be calm. And so there you have all kinds of just coarse misunderstandings of the nature of things. I should say that the practice of meditation and everything, yes, it does make you lucid, but it also should make you generous, kindly, and that is those emotions are perfectly capable of engaging in the world in a positive way. You don't need to be motivated by outrage or anger justice. Those get things done, those correct certain situations, but they're just fuels. And the fuels tend to burn you out, so you will see that people who are engaged in all kinds of areas, ecology, social justice movements, and all kinds of aspects, if they're motivated by outrage and excessive passion, they will eventually, it makes you depressed, and then also that makes you ineffective as well. And you also stray over the lines. Sometimes to make your points, you are willing to stretch the truth on matters as well. But that's the only way they know how to do action. And so the Buddha is saying, it's not necessary to function on those kind of drives and emotions to get things done in a lucid way, contributing to well-being and peace. There are other emotions that work just fine, and you don't get depressed and you don't burn out. You can bring this to your work as well. People, they have these motivational kind of ideas in all kinds of areas of life, especially in modern, like, competitive societies, professional sports, and all of these competitive things. There's a lot of rah-rah coaching talk and so forth about how you need to want it and so forth. But actually, that kind of talk, it apparently does get things done, but it also, people burn out. It destroys them in some ways. And that's not necessary. One of my favorite things from the 60s was, so frisbees were coming in, frisbees. First it was a very uncompetitive thing to do. I think it was college kids that, like, around Harvard that started throwing plates back and forth and stuff. Like, of course they managed to turn it into competitive frisbee, but geez, I don't know. But one thing that was cool was frisbee with dogs. And I mean, it's quite amazing what super athletes dogs are. And imagine these beautiful slow motion videos of dogs plucking frisbees out of the air, like they're jumping twice their height. They put an Olympic high jumper to shame, and they've never trained a moment in their life. And they intersect at 30 degrees north, 20 degrees south, vertically 78 degrees, and watch their face while they're doing it. Their eyes are drooping, their jaw is relaxed, and then they just at the right moment, they pick it up. And then, of course, are they concerned about, now how will I fall to the ground? It doesn't occur to them. Now they concern themselves. Now, how shall I land? And you can see the pause in the air. They're flexing like this. They're utterly relaxed. They're not, I've got to jump and I've got to make sure that I land right because I could hurt myself if I don't. And no, it's none of that. Somehow they managed to pull this off magnificently. And was it because they were motivated by their coach? No. Why do they do this? It's just fun, Why not do it? And they do it like at beyond gold medal Olympic standards. And then of course, did they win? They don't know. They just trot back you don't know whether they were the fourth best dog or the first best dog or anything. None of those motivations are necessary. You can see that we can perform at extraordinary levels without the slightest idea of winning and losing, motivations, or anything like that, just because you want to do it. Or it's fun, or it's playful, and include all kinds of areas of life. You can be amazing at it. You don't have to bring all these comparisons and this motivation and these ideas, psychological motivation, because psychologists motivating these athletes. I really don't think it works. So the Buddha is examining the spirit that you do things in. And you can bring the wrong attitudes to meditation as well and to your spiritual practice. He's very much into right effort, which, by the way, is the next factor after right livelihood. But anyway, the motivations people have, I'm very impressed with people's, as it seems that the general economy of the West is, at least for the middle class, is declining. It's harder to get by. People have not just one job, but two jobs, and they're single parents trying to raise 2 kids, 3 kids, and they have another job on the weekend. It's amazing what they do. And they do it day after day, and if they have to catch a bus for a long trip to to work at McDonald's, and then they go to some other place to clean houses, and they come back, and they manage to do this. Quite astonishing. But what is their motivation? Motivation is they're motivated by caring for these children, so forth. These are right motivations. These are good motivations, is loving kindness. Of course, they can burn out as well if they worry too much about this. Right livelihood has a huge dimension of our lives. We spend so much time at this work, and then, of course, training for the work. And the Buddha is very clear that you should have skills, and that you need to develop skills and crafts and education, and that you need to also provide that for your kids as well. They need to be trained because if you don't have any skills or training, you're going to end up at the bottom of things. You have no special skills, nothing. It was true in the 5th century BC, and it's true now. And there's nothing dreadful about that. Skills and crafts are beautiful things if you bring the right attitude to it. And your livelihood also can be fine as well if you bring the right attitude to it. I've had all kinds of people come to the monastery from all walks of life, and we have talks, and some of them are worried about especially if they're, like if you have a sort of just a job that you go to, it's one thing, but if you're in sales or something like this. So I was talking to several realtors, a young guy with a family in Vancouver, and he's stressed, talking about the stress of this. And my father actually was a realtor for many, many years as well. But what is the kind of talk that they talk with you about their motivation? You got to make the sale, like how are you making the sale? What are you wrinkling your forehead to do it, or like what is effort to make a sale? What is this? All kinds of magical thinking. It doesn't work that way. To want to make the sale, to hope you make the sale, it has no effect on the sale. None. What can you do? If you're a car salesman, there's just, you can present the thing, you can give the talk and everything. And of course, if you can't step over the line. You can't go into the dishonesty stuff. You present it and they buy it or they don't buy it. And you realize that you show up, you do the thing, and don't exhaust yourself by magical thinking about hoping, wishing, wanting, trying, because it's ineffective. That's not what happens. That's not how it works. And then you can do this thing without creating all kinds of stress and distorted thinking. I mean, if stress continues for a period of time, you're not going to be able to think straight, and you're going to start to make bad judgments, So we need a sense of reality about what is it that gets things done. I saw that the newest dog that won the Westminster Dog Show. He doesn't know he won the dog show. He wasn't motivated, trying, or anything like that. He was just trotting around, showed up, got petted a lot, given little treats from now on, and won the show. Magical thinking. Maybe the owner was thinking, if he can just win, then just a huge amount of our wishing, hoping is wasted. And in fact, so we're going to go on to right effort, because I actually want to do I hope to do the 37 requisites in 12 talks. Actually, it seems like I might make it, actually. We've got 3 more to go. Will he make it? I hope so. Sweating. I have to. I don't have to. I don't hope. Maybe, maybe not. So right effort, in fact, the first of right effort is prevention. And what is it, prevention? Unskillful emotions and attitudes. And what are they? Hoping, wishing, wanting as an effective means of getting something done in life. That's not, if it's if you're straining, that kind of strain is of no value. What gets things done is you do it. I also have this conversation with university students, and it took me quite a while in university to actually learn this. Also, when I start meditating and so forth, that wanting to do well on the exam and hoping to do well, and the terror that you won't, and so forth, and what'll happen to me if I don't make it, then I won't be able to get into the next stage, and then what'll happen? I'll end up working in a mill, and I won't be able to, on and on. I have one young lady, I think her father, they're Sri Lankan, I think, and I think her father called, although I said I don't do phone interviews or whatever and so forth, but anyway, her father called and he wrote emails, and she's 18 and she's in university and she's driving herself crazy. She's a perfectionist. She's been this way for a long time, so could you talk to her? So I said, I remembered being 18 in university, and so I did talk to her. And that's the main thing. As the conversations went on, and I said, where do you think this needing to be perfect started? It was in grade 5. She remembered there's a moment in grade 5 where she got praised for really doing it well, and it changed her whole attitude of herself. But at the same time, it left her with the obligation that if you want to be praised and if you want to be worthy, then you have to be perfect. Obviously, she's very intelligent because she actually could do this stuff. But what she didn't need to do was terror and anxiety about not making a 95. Because that wanting, hoping, and the whole ego on the line is not how you get 95 on the exam. Turns out, you go to the class, you listen to what is said, you make notes, and if they assign something that requires research, you go and do it, and you don't not do it. And then you write it out, rehearse it, memorize it, go in, write the exam or the paper, and if the contents are what they asked you to do, you get an A. And whether you hope you get an A or not has nothing to do with it. Whether you're anxious about it, nervous about it, proud of yourself, or it's all absolutely has nothing to do with what you want. There is you want this mark. And so that's the conversation, because the internal, and people just talk to each other about it, like, oh my God, I'm just, if I don't make this, I've got to make this, and I hope, I don't know what'll happen. I hope, and wanting, and wishing, irrelevant. Have to get back to this reality, what it is that gets your goal done, and it's that, and it doesn't have to be fueled by these things because they're magical. You might as well a lot of people do. They pray, and or they even do secret superstitious sacrifices and all kinds of stuff, and it's human nature. The Buddha is trying to get people past that. That's not how the causality structure works in this world. So we have to examine this because it's just pervasive, this idea of what is motivation. Proper motivation is goodwill to yourself and to others. And also to understand that to have a kindness to yourself is not regarding whether of you success or your failure. So this is also philosophical, that you are to have goodwill for yourself, quite indifferent to the success or failure, the praise or the blame, the good fortune or the bad fortune, the fame or obscurity. You see how many people go off the rails in track if they get a little famous, just and others go off when they're famous and then they become obscure. They get marginalized. They're a very good athlete at 22, and then it's over, and then nothing, and start drinking and so forth. It's just this is the wrong attitude to all of this. The Buddha is pointing this out in the Metta Sutta, that you are to radiate goodwill to beings in spite of both their positive qualities and their negative qualities. So without regard to positive or negative, whether they're small, large, near, far, born, to be born, magnificent, trivial, those are not to be brought into the reason for radiating loving kindness, and also for oneself. But that goodwill is a very strong motivation to take care of oneself in a proper way, and it's not like people don't get anything done if they have goodwill. They can get everything done. And removal. So this young lady she would, every couple of months she'd call back and talk to her about how she's doing and if she's managing it. And she would start to get it. She's getting it, and then every now and then the old ways would grip her and so forth. So I will see how it goes. I wish it's kind of advice that I wish I had heard. Somebody had sat me down when I was 18 in first year and explained about all these wasted, wrong kind of attitudes and emotions towards these things. The next two, of course, we already talked about. Did I talk about right effort with this group, or was it the previous group? I can't remember. The previous group. So anyway, briefly, 4 right efforts. The next 2 are the positive right efforts. That is, to bring into existence that which hasn't been brought into existence before. Then they're planting the seeds. And what are the seeds? There's 7 factors of enlightenment, which I did talk to this group for. I am absolutely sure. The first talk. 7 factors of enlightenment are the 3rd and the 4th of the right efforts. Bringing into existence positive things which are not there, and then deepening and developing them. 3rd and 4th right efforts are to do with the 7 factors of enlightenment. So it's nice that we can just plug that in. This is the nice thing about this 37 requisites. They play nicely with each other. There's slightly different textures to each of the arrangements, and they give you different kind of insights. But they all overlap and interact. So the first of the right effort, the first 2 are prevention and removal of 5 hindrances, and the second 2 are the production, development, and cultivation of the 7 factors of enlightenment. Then we shall move to right mindfulness, and I will go to one particular part of right mindfulness, that is mindfulness of Dhamma categories, the last of the 4 foundations of mindfulness. And what are listed there: 5 hindrances, 5 khandhas, 6 sense bases and their objects, 7 factors of enlightenment, the Eightfold Path, 4 Noble Truths. But the bare bones of this is just the 5 hindrances and the 7 factors of enlightenment. So the 4th category of right mindfulness, mindfulness of Dhamma objects, categories. By the way, the early translation of that is it's Dhamma Nupassana. So this is the Pali Dhamma, Dhamma. Nupassana, mindfulness, or insight into seeing. Pasana means seeing. And they would translate it as mindfulness of mental objects, which I would read that again and again. I think, I don't know what that means. Mental objects? What the? Then eventually I thought, what it is? It's little menus. 5 this, 5 that. 5, it's like, and why are they? They're in that. They're categories. Little categories, because you're supposed to do something about each of these categories. You have an attitude towards each of these categories. So I started translating it as mindfulness of Dhamma categories. And then one day I was reading Bhikkhu Bodhi, and he decided that there's a better translation for this. Dhamma categories. Wow. Zap. Telepathy. I was very pleased. The third foundation of mindfulness is mindfulness of mind. So chitta, nupassana. Chitta means the mental processes. And it's a list, and it's very similar to the hindrances. So it's whether one is angry, or you should be mindful of whether you're angry or not, greedy or not, whether your mind is contracted or expansive, deluded or not, surpassable or unsurpassable. And it looks like you're just to be mindful of that. Just be aware, are you angry or not? And some people stop there, or in fact even specialize in that mindfulness of mind. My meditation is mindfulness of mind. All I'm supposed to do is just note, I'm angry, or I'm not angry. But that means you didn't turn the page, because the next page is the 5 hindrances. And the 5 hindrances, there's the page before right mindfulness is right effort. And it says that when you come to the 5 hindrances, you're to remove them or prevent them. So you're not just to watch them. You're not to look, I'm angry, I'm mindful, I'm mindfully angry. No. You're to recognize this is one of the 5 hindrances. And in right effort, which comes before right mindfulness, they told me to remove that. So I'm not to watch it. I'm mindful enough to know that I'm angry, and now I have an obligation. Because the list of the 5 hindrances, those are to be prevented and removed. And now, what's in my mind? Are the 7 factors there? Oh, if not, my obligation is to develop them, bring them into existence. Am I just nothing going on, dull or whatever? No, that's not good enough. I need to develop these. I need to bring them into existence. So this is where you see this, how right effort regarding 5 hindrances and 7 factors of enlightenment end up in the 4th foundation of mindfulness as well. And that's the basis of them. The other ones, the 5 khandhas, notice the difference between 5 hindrances and 7 factors of enlightenment and the other categories. 5 hindrances are actions of the mind, movements of the mind. 5 khandhas are simply a description of what a human is. The body, perception, feelings, consciousness, volitions. This is a description. And then the 6 sense bases are also just a kind of a description. It's like there's a eye consciousness, there's an eye, and then there's objects of sight. There's an ear, intact hearing, and then sounds. It's just like a description, a very different texture than the 5 hindrances, which are emotional structures that you're supposed to do something about. And then the next one is 7 factors of enlightenment, which again is all about emotions and volitions and something you're supposed to do something about. And after that is the Eightfold Path. And again, it's just a description of the path. So I suspect that these are imported into it. These are collecting things with numbers. So I think the original basic one is, which you can find, is to say you can find a version of the four foundations of mindfulness without the six sense bases, and you can find one without the 5 khandhas, and you can find one without the Eightfold Path, but you can't find one without the 5 hindrances and the 7 factors of enlightenment. So it's likely that this is the basis, and it makes a lot of sense. It's something you can do something about. You're to attend to this. You're watching your mind, but not merely watching your mind. The mindfulness is there as a sentry, as a sort of a border guard, and they're not just watching you go through the border. You probably had to answer some questions. You might have to answer some on the way back as well. What are you bringing in? Etc. They want to. They're not counting cars. They're looking for who's not welcome and who can come in, who cannot. This is the description of what mindfulness is by the Buddha. It's a sentry at the gate of a walled city, and it is an informed sentry, and it is not to admit certain mental structures, and others are to be welcomed in. And this is basically the only description of sati that there is. The only other secondary description is that it's the capacity to remember the instructions, which you have heard even long ago. So you've been told about the 5 hindrances, but you're lost in anger. So you must have forgotten that the instructions were not to do that. So if you can't remember having been told this, then it's hopeless. So mindfulness is memory, but not just being able to remember your address or, remember what happened in grade 8 or something. You're to remember the instructions for how to deal with these 5 hindrances by prevention and removal, and the instructions for development of these 7 factors of enlightenment. I'll say the practices of loving kindness, generosity, kindness, and clarity. And to be welcomed in, mindfulness is to welcome in two things, samatha and vipassana. Samatha is another word for samadhi, which is the 8th factor of the path. I think I might make it. 3 minutes to go. Samatha and vipassana. Now you've heard vipassana, like whole courses on vipassana, but it's really just seeing clearly. And the Buddha is emphasizing that the 2 visitors come riding towards the walled city. And why are they admitted? Because they bring an accurate report of the state of the kingdom. And they're welcomed in and sent into the city to the king at the center of the city, so that he is informed of the real nature of things. That things are, O Lord, they are impermanent, unsatisfactory, and without substance. Samatha, vipassana tell you the nature of reality, and it doesn't tell you that, it doesn't promote, let's go take over the next kingdom, because If we could just get that, we'd be happy forever. It's permanent, oh Lord. It's great. We would get some permanence happening if we could do that. They're permanently happy over there, so we should go get that, take that away. Or if we got that, we could be permanently happy or something. So this is misinformation. So this is the idea of the mindfulness filter, is to keep you in tune with the nature of reality, that it's very uncertain. Don't grasp at it. Don't invest in wrong ideas about it, etc. Samatha is clarity and strength of mind. And you get that clarity and strength of mind by actually practicing, things like breath meditation and paying attention. Stilling the mind. The strength is developed in the body by moving the body around. Strength in the mind is developed by stilling the mind. The mind that moves all the time is weak. The mind that can be stilled is strong. The body that never moves around is weak. The body that moves around and so forth gains strength. You've come to the gym for the last 7 days, and hopefully you keep up the gymnasium work of the mind. That is the strength that you get by asking it to stay here and do what I ask you to, instead of just running around madly. Vipassana is simply to see clearly, and it shouldn't be exaggerated what that means. There are all kinds of sort of special ideas about what this Vipassana stuff is, but it just means to see clearly, and it means to see the important things clearly. And not necessarily at a minute level, not the subtle sensations in the body, just tiny sensations, a kind of focusing on that. The big reality is that the big picture is to see that life is anicca, is impermanent. Everything's impermanent. Yesterday's gone. The last hour is gone. Just that fact. You'd think we could see that, but we keep forgetting. But to see it is vipassana. To see it, and that's another form of wisdom. So we talked about this wisdom stuff. Wisdom occurs 5 times in the 37. The samatha and vipassana combine to produce wisdom. And what is the wisdom in the Eightfold Path? It circles back to the right view. So it doesn't just end at samadhi. It circles back, and samadhi promotes more clarity about right view, which promotes more clarity about right intention, which promotes more clarity about right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, and so forth. It goes in a circle, a self-promoting circle, increasing in strength as it goes around until it comes to fulfillment. And so we have finished the 37 requisites of enlightenment. First time I did that, in a retreat, first time. So I blame Ajahn Sudanto for asking me to do this, but it turned out he was right. I kind of learned a lot, actually. It made me I haven't really thought about that in that way, and so forth. So it was a very good idea. Thank you very much.